The gunshot hit the tree 3 inches from Tom's face. He didn't flinch. He grabbed Rex by the collar and ran. Not because he was brave. Because stopping meant dying, and he wasn't ready to die. Not here, not in this jungle, not with whatever they were carrying still locked inside a bag on his back. The trees closed around them like walls as they sprinted through the undergrowth, branches cutting across Tom's arms and cheeks, the hot, thick air of the jungle pressing into his lungs like something alive. Behind them, voices, sharp, coordinated, moving in a sweep pattern through the trees. These weren't local men hired for cheap. These were trained, and they were close. Tom could hear the crack of boots on undergrowth, could hear the short bursts of radio communication cutting through the noise. They had numbers. They had radios. And they knew exactly which direction he was running. Rex ran at his side, stride for stride, the German shepherd's paws barely making a sound against the soft earth as they pushed through a curtain of low palm fronds and hit a narrow game trail that cut northeast. Tom followed the trail hard, his lungs burning, the weight of the pack pulling at his shoulders. He had been running for 11 minutes. He knew because he always counted. It was the kind of habit you built when your life depended on managing your resources, knowing exactly how much fuel was left before your body started breaking down on you. 11 minutes at this pace in this heat with this elevation change, and he was already at the edge. The trail curved sharply to the right. Rex cut left, off the trail, into the dense vegetation without any signal, without any hesitation. Tom followed. He trusted that without thinking about it. That trust was the most valuable thing he owned. They broke through a wall of undergrowth and stopped. The river was in front of them. Brown and loud, crashing over half-submerged rocks, carrying the weight of 3 weeks of heavy rain with it. Tom looked left, looked right. The bank stretched in both directions with no obvious crossing point he could see. He checked his GPS. The extraction route was on the other side of this river. Everything he needed was on the other side. And the voices behind them were getting louder. Rex. Tom looked at the dog. We have to cross. He took a step toward the water. Rex moved in front of him. Not aggressively. Not barking. Just placed himself between Tom and the river's edge with a quiet, solid certainty, like a door closing. Tom stepped left. Rex stepped with him. Tom stepped right. Rex stepped with him. Move. The dog didn't move. He stared at the water with those dark, still eyes, and something about the way he stood, not tense the way a frightened animal stands, but low and deliberate, for feet planted hard, sent a cold wire of unease up the back of Tom's neck. Rex had been through things that would have broken most animals. He had never once refused a command. Never. Not in 2.5 years of working together in the worst places Tom had ever been. The refusal lasted 3 seconds. Tom's jaw tightened. Every second standing still was a second the men behind them closed the gap. His hand went to the strap of the pack. He would swim it if he had to. He would carry Rex across if he had to. And then he saw it. Something in the current. Just upstream, maybe 15 meters away. The shape of it moved wrong. Too dense, too deliberate in the way it turned in the water. A body. Male, from the size, face down, held against a rock cluster midstream by the force of the current. The clothing was field gear, not local, not civilian. Someone else had tried this crossing. And it had killed them. Tom stared at it. He took 1 step back from the bank. His breathing slowed. And Rex, as if he had been waiting precisely for that 1 step back, turned his head and looked directly at Tom with an expression that a person who had never spent real time with a trained working dog might have dismissed as nothing. Tom didn't dismiss it. It said, I told you. Now look closer. Tom looked closer. He shifted his position slightly, changed his angle on the bank, and watched the way the water moved around the base of the nearest rock. It churned differently on the near side, not the clean white turbulence of water hitting stone, but a deeper, more uncertain movement, the kind that came from water undermining substrate from below. He looked down. He looked at the section of bank directly in front of where he'd been about to step. Nothing visibly wrong. Solid earth. Dark with moisture, flecked with root fibers and leaf litter. He picked up a branch from the ground beside him, about the thickness of his forearm, and pressed it forward into the bank. The ground took it cleanly. He pressed harder. And the branch disappeared. Straight down, no resistance, like pushing through wet paper, the ground consuming it in a single, silent motion. Tom's throat tightened. He pressed his foot back farther from the edge. The shore wasn't ground. It was a crust, a thin shell of compressed organic matter over a cavity carved out by the river working underneath the bank, patient and invisible and deep. If he had taken that step, if Rex had not stood in his way, he would have gone through at full speed, carrying 40 pounds on his back, directly into the water with no chance of recovery. The current would have taken him the same way it had taken the man on the rocks upstream. Tom stood very still. He looked at the branch disappearing into the false ground. He looked at the river. He looked at Rex. "You knew," he said quietly. Not surprised. Not grateful in a way that needed words. Just certain. Rex turned away from the river and looked into the trees behind them. His ears went up. His body went completely still. And in that specific, knife-edge stillness, Tom heard what Rex had already heard. Footsteps. Close. 15 meters, maybe less. Moving carefully through the undergrowth, no longer running. They were flanking. They had found the trail. "We run," Tom said. Rex was already moving. They went left, parallel to the river, hard and fast, Rex threading through the vegetation at a pace that shouldn't have been possible for an animal his size in this density of brush. Tom ran with everything he had left, which wasn't much, but it was enough. He could hear the shout behind them, one man calling to the others, adjusting the sweep. They had been spotted. Or heard. It didn't matter which. A gunshot punched through the canopy above, wide and panicked. A shot fired at sound and movement, not at a confirmed target. That meant they were behind them. Still behind. Tom pushed harder. Rex cut right, hard, no warning, into a section of jungle so dense that Tom lost visual on him for 2 full seconds, crashing through on trust alone. He emerged into a small clearing and Rex was there, already stopped, head up, facing something. Tom slowed. The tree was enormous. It had been alive for so long that the jungle had built itself around it. Vines the thickness of rope corkscrewing up its flanks, other trees growing against it and leaning away as if the trunk itself radiated something they didn't want to be too close to. The base spread out in massive buttress roots that arched up from the ground like flying supports on an old cathedral, creating deep shadow caverns between them. And the trunk itself, the main body of it, had split, somewhere in its long history, leaving a gap roughly the width of a man's shoulders facing toward them, dark inside, absolute darkness, the kind that made something in the human brain go cold and say don't. Rex walked directly to it, paused at the entrance for exactly 1 second, looking back at Tom, the same look he had given him at the river, that patient, certain look, then stepped inside and disappeared into the dark. Tom stood in the small clearing with the sound of boots crashing through undergrowth 30 meters behind him. He unclipped the torch from his chest rig. He stepped inside. The first thing he felt was the temperature. 10 degrees cooler than outside instantly. The second thing was the silence. The thick, enclosed, acoustically unusual silence of a space that had been sealed for a long time. The torch beam swept the interior. Tom's breath stopped. The inside of the tree had been reinforced. Wooden struts, hand-cut, old but structural, braced against the inner walls of the trunk to hold the hollow space open. The floor was not earth. It was concrete, poured in sections, uneven, gray, with the damp patina of something laid years ago and never disturbed since. The walls of the tree itself still lived, the inner bark slightly luminous with patches of bioluminescent fungus that gave the space a faint, green-edged glow even without the torch. On one side, a narrow shelf carved directly into the living wood, old enough that the bark had grown slightly over its edges. In the corner, a rusted metal ring set into the wall. The ghost of something hung there and removed long ago. This space had been built. Someone had done this deliberately, with tools, with materials that had to be carried into this jungle, with a specific purpose in mind. Tom swept the torch across the floor. Rex was in the far corner, scratching. His paws raking at a section of floor near the base of the trunk, pulling at something, and the sound his claws made was not the soft sound of earth. It was the hard, flat sound of metal. Tom crossed the space in 4 strides and dropped to one knee. There was a seam in the concrete. A rectangle, perfectly cut, with a recessed pull ring set flush into one edge. Recent. No growth or rust on the ring. Tom gripped it and pulled upward. The panel was heavy, concrete over a metal plate, set into a shallow recess in the floor. It lifted with effort. And beneath it, sitting in a waterproof storage container set into the earth, was a box. Matte black. Field-grade waterproof casing. Locked with a combination system that Tom didn't have the digits for. No markings. No label. Nothing to say who put it here, when, or why. Tom picked it up. It was dense, heavier than it should have been for its size. He turned it in his hands. Rex made a sound, a low, urgent sound, not a bark, more like a push of air through his chest, and Tom was already moving before he understood why, rolling to his feet and pulling backward toward the interior wall. Because outside the tree, footsteps had stopped. Right outside. Close enough to touch. A voice, flat and quiet, found him. Tom killed the torch. Complete darkness. Complete silence from outside. The specific silence of men organizing themselves before entering a tight space. Tom set his back against the curved interior wall, the box tucked under his left arm, his right hand moving to the only weapon he had left, a fixed blade that had been on him since Turbo. Rex moved to the entrance. Tom couldn't see him, but he could hear the placement, the soft, deliberate movement of the dog positioning himself in the narrow gap of the tree's entrance, low, completely still, his body language broadcasting nothing. Just a presence. Waiting. Tom thought, if we come out of this, I'm buying you the biggest plate of food you've ever seen in your life. Then the first man came through. Fast and crouched, a tactic that was designed for tight entry. Rex hit him before his eyes had time to adjust from the outside light. The sound was sudden and absolute. The specific, unmistakable sound of a trained military dog engaging a threat at full capability. The man went down. Tom moved hard from the wall. The second man was already coming through, saw Tom, swung the weapon up, and Tom was inside the arc before it completed, the tight space working for him exactly the way he needed it to. Too close for the weapon. Close enough for everything else. 3 seconds of violence. Then silence. Tom straightened up, breathing hard. 2 men on the floor. He looked for Rex in the dark and then heard him. A sound that was wrong. A sound that was not the controlled, composed sound of the dog after an engagement. A thin, strained sound. A sound that hit Tom in the chest like something physical. He clicked the torch back on. Rex was pressed against the interior wall, front legs planted, head down. A dark stain was spreading through the fur on his left flank, not large, but growing. The first man had a tactical knife on his belt. In the chaos of the entry, in the dark, during the half-second of engagement before the man went down, the blade had connected. Tom was across the space before he was aware of moving. Rex. He put one hand on the dog's side, the other pressing firmly against the wound. Rex turned his head and looked at Tom. His breathing was elevated, not the panicked breathing of shock, but the tighter, controlled breathing of an animal managing pain. His eyes were clear, focused. And in that moment, that specific, devastating moment, Tom felt something crack open in his chest that all the close calls and all the near misses and all the long years of doing this had never managed to crack open before. Because Rex looked at him with those clear, steady eyes, bleeding, hurting, and did not make a sound. Did not ask for anything. Did not retreat or curl or surrender to it. He just looked at Tom as if to say, I'm still here. I'm still with you. Don't stop. Tom pressed his hand harder against the wound and said, very quietly, I've got you. His voice did not shake. But everything inside him did. He held pressure with his palm, the other hand working fast through the small medical kit at his hip, field dressing, clotting agent, adhesive trauma bandage. The wound was a deep cut, not a puncture to the body cavity. He could tell that much from the angle and from Rex's breathing, which was elevated but not deteriorating. He worked without speaking, hands steady from years of practice, mind running the assessment even while the emotion of it pressed against every wall he had built over every hard year of doing this job. Rex held still under his hands. Perfectly still. Trusted him completely. Tom secured the dressing, pressed once more, felt the bleeding slow. He sat back on his heels and looked at the dog. Rex looked back at him. Then, slowly, deliberately, he stood up. All four legs steady. The left flank compressed where the bandage held. He took one step toward the entrance of the tree. Then looked back at Tom. "Yeah," Tom said, his jaw tight. "I know. Not yet." Then a gun went off outside. Then again. Different weapon. Not the same gun as the men on the floor. Something heavier. Tom grabbed the box and pressed against the wall, eyes on the entrance. Footsteps outside, one man, walking calmly, no rush, no tactical approach. A figure stepped into the frame of the tree's opening and lowered their weapon. The torch caught a face. Middle-aged, composed, weathered in the way of someone who had spent a long time outside in hard climates. He wore nothing tactical. Dark civilian shirt, worn boots, nothing that marked him as belonging to any side of any conflict. He looked at the two men on the floor without expression. Looked at Rex standing at the entrance with blood on his flank. Looked at Tom holding the box. And then he said, with complete calm, as if continuing a conversation that had been interrupted, "You opened it yet?" Tom stared at him. "No," he said. The man nodded slowly. "Good," he said. "Don't." He paused. Everything that's happened in the last 3 days, every man they sent, every route they cut off, every time they got ahead of you, it was all because of what's in that box. He looked at it the way a person looks at something they are afraid of and trying not to show it. If you open it, you'll understand why they never stop. And then you'll understand why they can't let you leave. Tom didn't move. "Who are you?" The man looked at him steadily. "Someone who made the same mistake you're about to make," he said. 3 years ago. And I've been trying to fix it since." The silence that followed that sentence lasted about 4 seconds. 4 seconds of jungle sound coming through the split in the tree, insects, distant birds, the faint rush of the river, while Tom looked at this man and ran every variable he had. The man could have killed him. He had the angle, the weapon, the clear shot, and Tom had been focused on Rex. He hadn't. That meant something. It wasn't proof of anything, but it meant something. Rex had turned around from the entrance and was standing between Tom and the stranger, not in attack posture, not hackles up, not growling. Just standing. Watching. That was the reading Tom trusted most of all. Rex looked at the man for a long moment. Then he turned and looked toward the back of the tree. Toward the way out. Toward north. Tom looked at the man. "What's north of here?" he asked. The man almost allowed himself a small, grim expression. "A way out," he said. "If we move now." Tom looked at Rex. Rex looked at him. The dog was standing on an injured flank, bandaged, bleeding slowed, and looking at him with those steady, ancient eyes as if the answer was already obvious. As if the answer had always been obvious. "Lead," Tom said to the man. "Rex goes between us." The man stepped outside. Tom followed. Rex walked between them, slightly favoring his left side, but moving, steady and deliberate and utterly committed. The jungle closed around all three of them as they disappeared north into the trees. The route the man, he gave no name, only told Tom to call him by the field alias Rail, took them north through terrain that Tom would never have identified as passable. Not a trail. A sequence of landmarks. A specific rock formation, a dry stream bed, the remnants of what had once been a fence line, the fence posts half consumed by the jungle but still traceable at ground level if you knew where to look. Rail moved through it fast and without hesitation, his knowledge of the terrain exact and unsentimental, the knowledge of someone who had used this route under pressure before. Tom moved behind him, watching his patterns, watching the way he navigated choices without pausing, measuring him against every type he had encountered in his career. Rex moved between them, and Tom checked him every few minutes, watching the gait, watching the breathing, watching the way he held his injured side. The dog moved carefully but consistently, the slight adjustment in his stride the only visible concession to pain. Not slowing. Not stopping. Keeping pace. Every time Tom looked at him, something in his chest tightened with a feeling he couldn't find a clean name for. It sat somewhere between gratitude and guilt and a love that had no comfortable word attached to it. 20 minutes into the route, Rail stopped them with one raised hand. All three stopped instantly. Rex's ears went to maximum. Both forward, then rotating, then forward again, locked on something northeast. Rail tilted his head. Then he said, barely audible, 2 men. Static position. 20 meters. Tom scanned northeast through the trees. Nothing visible. Then he adjusted his eye line down, looking not for movement but for the specific, wrong shape of stillness. 2 forms, crouched at the base of a tree cluster, covered, positioned to watch the trail below them. A static ambush, set for someone coming from the direction Tom had just come from. Waiting for him. Tom looked at Rail. Rail pointed west, a wide bypass. Tom nodded. They moved west, slow and low, Rex moving with a precision in the undergrowth that barely displaced a leaf. It took 12 minutes to clear the position and regain the route on the other side. When they did, Rail glanced back at Rex and said quietly, without any particular emotion, "How does he do that?" Tom didn't answer. Because there wasn't an answer that fit into any explanation that wasn't just, "That's who he is." The terrain changed as they climbed, the lowland jungle giving way to denser, darker growth as the elevation rose, the light changing quality, greener, cooler, the sounds shifting as the species changed around them. Tom's legs were burning. He was running on something beyond exhaustion now, that place where the body has used everything and is operating on whatever lies underneath, something older and harder than energy, something the body keeps in reserve for exactly this, for the moments when stopping means ending. He watched Rex ahead of him and let the dog set the pace. That had always been the arrangement, unspoken, established in the first month they worked together and never violated since. Rex set the pace. Tom kept it. They reached the ridge as the light was falling, the sun below the canopy now, the sky above the ridge line a deep orange bleeding into purple, the jungle below them disappearing into a gray-green shadow that stretched to every horizon. Tom stopped at the ridge and looked out. He was breathing hard. Rex stood beside him, hip touching Tom's leg, warm and solid and alive, and Tom looked out at the jungle, at the enormous, indifferent, extraordinary fact of it, all of it, spreading away in every direction, and allowed himself exactly 3 seconds of something that was not a plan and not a tactic and not a calculation. Just presence. Just standing here, still alive, with Rex beside him. Rail stopped beside him. He looked north. "There's a strip," he said. 2 kilometers. I have a contact." He paused. "The window closes at 0400. Tom looked at him. "Who's your contact?" Rail looked back at him steadily. "Same person who buried that box," he said. "Same person who built that chamber. Same person who's been trying to get that out of the country for 18 months. He looked at the box in Tom's hands. She thought if it was buried deep enough, they'd stop looking. He paused. They didn't stop. Tom looked at the box. He looked at Rail. "How many people know what's inside?" he asked. Rail was quiet for a moment. "Enough people died to make sure the number stayed small," he said. That was all he said. Tom didn't push it. He looked at Rex. Rex was looking north, ears up, nose working, already oriented toward the next thing, the next move, the next required act of this long and unfinished day. The dog did not look tired. The dog did not look defeated. He looked ready. Just as he had looked on the first day Tom had worked with him, 2.5 years ago in a training field in Belize, when a handler twice Rex's age had told Tom, "This one is different. He doesn't wait to be told what to protect. He already knows." Tom had thought that was handler pride talking. He understood now that it wasn't. "Let's go," Tom said. Rex was already moving. The descent on the north side was faster and harder than the climb. They moved in a loose formation, Rail leading, Tom behind him, Rex just to Tom's left and slightly ahead, a position the dog had settled into naturally about an hour back, slightly in front of Tom's shoulder, the position that a dog takes when it has decided that it is running point. Rail noticed it. He adjusted without comment, giving Rex the lead on the route choices through the increasingly dark descent. The dog never hesitated. Each fork, each drop, each section where multiple routes split from the main path, Rex chose without pause, with the same unhesitating certainty he had shown at every decision point since Turbo. Tom followed and felt the strange, deep, almost painful thing that came from trusting something that completely. It was not a feeling he had a clean relationship with. Trust had been expensive in his life. Trust had cost him things he hadn't recovered from yet. But this was different. This wasn't the trust that required proof and documentation and verified track record. This was older than that. This went somewhere below the reasoning parts of the brain and operated on something different. Something animal. Something that recognized, in Rex, a quality of commitment so total and so unconditional that it was almost impossible to look at directly. Rex stopped. Hard and sudden, the way he stopped only when the thing ahead was immediate. Tom and Rail froze behind him. The jungle was black now, full dark, the only light the ambient glow of a half-moon through the canopy, enough to see shapes but not detail. Tom activated the low-light monocular on his chest rig. Swept the tree-line ahead. Nothing. He looked at Rex. Rex was staring directly forward, body absolutely still, the focus in him so concentrated it was almost physical. Then Tom caught it, a flicker of infrared. Someone ahead was wearing equipment that responded to the wavelength his monocular used. They were in the trees at the base of the descent. 2 emitters. Maybe 3. Tom clicked the monocular off. He touched Rail's arm and pointed east. Rail understood immediately. They moved east, off the descent route, into older growth where the undergrowth was thinner and the spacing between trees gave them movement. Rex moved with them and then, without a signal from anyone, broke right and disappeared into the trees. Tom stopped. He looked at Rail. Where is he going? Rail looked after Rex. I don't know, he said. And then, from the direction of the men below them in the trees, sound. Movement. Rex's movement. Deliberate, designed to be heard, threading through the undergrowth in a direction away from Tom and Rail, pulling attention, pulling the men below east and away from the route. Tom understood in the same second it happened. The dog was running a decoy. He was pulling them. Buying time. Tom's jaw tightened. Move, he said. Fast. They ran. The airstrip was exactly where Rail had said it was, a narrow strip of grass cut into the tree-line, the darkness of it lighter than the surrounding jungle, the cleared sky above it showing stars. A figure stood at the far end near a small aircraft, a single engine, the kind that flew low and quiet and appeared on no registry. Female, Tom saw as they covered the last 200 meters, middle-aged, precise movements, someone waiting with the particular composure of a person who had been waiting in difficult places for a long time. She looked at Rail, looked at Tom, looked at the box in Tom's hands. She said nothing. She looked back at the tree-line. One missing, she said. It wasn't a question. Tom was already turned, looking at the trees. His chest was tight in a way that had nothing to do with the run. Rex, he said, quietly into the dark. Nothing. Rex. Nothing. Rail put a hand on Tom's shoulder. He knows this route, he said. Hill. Rex came through the tree-line at the south end of the strip at a dead run, full speed, the way a dog runs when something is directly behind it. He hit the grass of the strip and came straight for Tom, the injured flank working harder now, the slight asymmetry of his gait more visible in the open space. Tom dropped to one knee. Rex reached him and didn't slow. He hit Tom at full speed, his whole front against Tom's chest, and Tom caught him and held on, both arms around the dog, Rex's breathing hard and hot against his neck. Tom pressed his face into the fur at the top of Rex's head and held him there. Just for a second. Just held on. Rex stood in that hold, accepting it, then turned his head and licked once across the side of Tom's face. Matter of fact. Enough. We have to go. Tom laughed. A short, broken, entirely involuntary sound. He stood up. Let's go, he said. The plane lifted off the grass strip with barely 200 meters of runway to spare, the engine screaming, the nose tilting up sharply into the dark sky, the tree-line rushing past the windows and falling away below. Tom sat in the back with Rex beside him, the dog's warm weight against his leg, Rex's breathing evening out as the ground noise and the pursuit fell behind them. The box sat on Tom's knees. Rail sat across the narrow aisle, looking out the window at the jungle below, that deep, unbroken green barely visible in the moonlight, stretching away endlessly in every direction. Tom looked at the box. For the first time in 24 hours, he was still. Physically still. And in that stillness, everything that had happened in the last 3 days pressed in all at once, not as a sequence of events to be managed, but as a weight. As the real, physical weight of how close every single moment had been. The river. The ground that wasn't ground. The chamber. Rex between him and the knife in the dark. Rex bleeding on the floor and standing up anyway. Tom looked at the wound on Rex's flank, the bandage holding, the clotting agent doing its work, the dog managing it with a composure that Tom had never once managed with anything that had ever hurt him. He put his hand on Rex's head. Rex's ear moved under his palm. Tom looked out the window at the dark jungle below them. He thought about the box. He thought about what Rail had said, enough people died to make sure the number stayed small. He thought about the body in the river. He thought about the men in the tree chamber. He thought about the way this had started, quietly in a port city, with a simple job. Retrieve something. Deliver it. Disappear. He thought about how often that was the description of the thing that changed everything. He looked at Rail. The woman at the strip, he said. She's the one who hid the box. Rail nodded. Tom looked back out the window. She built the chamber, he said. Not a question. Years ago, Rail said. Before she knew it was going to matter. He paused. Before she understood what she was building it for. Tom turned the box over in his hands. The lock was a 6-digit combination. He had not tried to open it. He would not try to open it. He had the distinct, unambiguous feeling, the same feeling Rex had when he planted his feet at the river's edge, that opening this box was the one action that could not be undone. Where are we taking it? Tom asked. Rail looked at him. Somewhere they'll stop looking, he said. Or somewhere the looking stops mattering. Tom looked at him for a long moment. That's not the same thing, he said. Rail looked back at the window. No, he said. It's not. The jungle below them thinned at the edges. The first coastal light somewhere ahead, invisible but felt in the changed texture of the sky. Rex shifted against Tom's leg, resettling, sighing once in the low, involuntary way of a dog easing into proper rest. Tom looked down at him. In the low light of the aircraft, Rex's face had that specific, absolute peace that Tom had watched him find in the middle of extraordinary circumstances more times than he could count. The peace of an animal that has done what it came to do and is now simply present, simply resting, simply here. Tom felt something move through him that was not a thought and not a plan and not a calculation. It was quieter than all of those. It was the feeling of being known. Not evaluated, not assessed, not judged by what you'd done or what you were carrying or what it had cost. No, fully. The way Rex had always known him. Not the version of himself he showed in rooms, but the actual one, underneath all of it. The one who ran through jungle in the dark. The one who held pressure on a wound and didn't shake. The one who followed a dog left into the darkness because something older and truer than logic said to follow. Tom kept his hand on Rex's head until the dog's breathing slowed all the way to sleep. Then he kept his hand there anyway. He was still holding the box when the lights of a coastline appeared below them. The pilot said nothing. Rail said nothing. Tom looked at the box for a long time in the low dark of the cabin. Then he looked out at the approaching coast, the black water beyond it, the horizon beginning to separate from the sky in the first suggestion of light, the world slowly organizing itself out of night into something you could navigate. He thought about what came next. He thought about the fact that they were 3 people and a dog in a small aircraft carrying something that unknown number of armed people had tried very hard to kill him for. He thought about the fact that Rail had said the woman who built the chamber was still out there. Still waiting. And he thought about what Rail had said about his own mistake 3 years ago. And I've been trying to fix it since. Tom turned the box over once more. He pressed his thumb against the lock and felt the resistance of the mechanism. 6 digits. Somewhere in the world, someone knew those 6 digits. Someone had put them there. And whatever they had locked inside it had been worth hiding in a jungle chamber inside an ancient tree at the edge of the most impassable stretch of land in the Western Hemisphere. Whatever it was had been worth more than the lives of every man who had died trying to retrieve it or destroy it or protect it. Tom let out a long, slow breath. He was not afraid of it. He was something more complicated than afraid. He was awake. Alert in a way that had nothing to do with adrenaline and everything to do with the particular feeling of standing at the edge of something large and true, something that would change the shape of the ground under every step that came after. Rex slept beside him, warm and breathing, the bandage on his flank rising and falling steadily. The coast approached below. The horizon lightened by 1 more degree. And Tom looked at the box, and looked at Rex, and looked at the coast, and said quietly, to no one and to all of it, "All right, let's see what you are." The plane banked slightly north. The coast slid beneath them and was gone. And somewhere in the jungle far behind them, in the dark hollow of a centuries-old tree, the concrete floor still held its empty recess, the shape of the missing thing, the exact dimensions of the secret that had just flown out over the water. Waiting, the way hidden things always wait, for whatever came next.